What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Week 13 NFL Power Rankings show. This is officially the home stretch here, baby. My, how fast this NFL season has gone. Before we get into the Power Rankings here this week, I just want to say thank you to all of you that enjoyed last week's show of the how it started versus how it's going around the NFL, kind of last week's Power Rankings podcast, 3.5 hour Megalodon special. I did not expect that show to do as well as it did. Damn near 40,000 views. And the craziest thing, an average view duration of 47 minutes on that bad boy. It was a reminder that you guys that watch this channel are the absolute NFL sicko diehards. And I could not be any more thankful to have you guys here. So I just want to say thank you to you guys, the best viewers, the best fans in the business. With that said, if you enjoyed that show, if you enjoyed these power rankings, I do encourage you to check out my podcast, The Fully Inflated Football Show, where we do have those long 2-3 hour podcasts every week. So that link is in the description down below. But otherwise, let's go ahead and get into it with this week's power rankings. I do have a new team at the bottom this week. It is going to be the New York Giants. I do think this team did what they needed to do to move on from Daniel Jones. You can debate whether they should have cut him now or waited till the post-June 1st. Clearly, they felt comfortable with their cap management to do that now. But I will say I think that was the last kind of nail in the coffin for this locker room to kind of mail it in on the season. It will be interesting to see if Brian Daboll can at least capture this locker room and maybe entertain the good people of America here on Thursday against a measly Cowboys team. You don't want to see this team just completely mail it in, even if you are kind of trying to get that number one pick so that you can get the quarterback of your future, hopefully. But yeah, at 31, I do have the Jacksonville Jaguars going up a spot on the bye this week. Trevor Lawrence is maybe going to give it a go. I will continue to hold the opinion that the Jags aren't the worst team in football if Trevor is playing, but that's about the extent of positivity I can bring to the Jags fans coming off of their bye week. And then the Las Vegas Raiders at number 30, actually rounding out our bottom tier here. The Raiders are the last of these three teams that I would consider just easy outs, where you can actually show up, make some mistakes, and still probably win. I mean, that's just how bad the Raiders and our previous two teams are. Just a complete lack of talent. We knew it was going to be an issue coming into the year, but then you take away Christian Wilkins, their big signing, you trade away Devontae Adams, Max Crosby trying to battle through injuries. Only so much Gardner Minshew can do out there, even if he does have a superstar playmaker in Brock Bowers. At least Raiders fans have something to enjoy watching every Sunday. But we are going to climb up to our next tier. This was a good week for a lot of these 2 and 3 win teams to kind of separate themselves from the true bottom feeders. This is a tier of still bad football teams, but teams that you do still have to show up to beat, as we saw with a lot of these teams this week, starting with the Dallas Cowboys, who beat the Washington Commanders in probably the craziest football game you will see over the course of a 2 or 3 year stretch. This game was like 13-6 with 5 minutes to go, and it ended, 30-24? Like something absurd. I want to know, for the bettors out there, what are the craziest outcomes that you had, or the fantasy football community? I know I was happy to have Terry McLaurin get an 85-yard touchdown to make this game interesting at the end, and then they missed the PAT to tie it. Just a wild sequence of events. For the Cowboys, though, this defense, with Micah Parsons back alone, is much more competent. And the special teams, I mean, how fun is Kevontae Turpin? Dude, that kick return was sweet. So they at least have a heartbeat in Dallas. But yeah, them taking on the Giants on Thanksgiving is not exactly going to be the best game. And with that said, if you need a little bit of a boost to help you get through that game, pump you up through the food hangover to watch Tommy DeVito take on Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys Thanksgiving afternoon, there is not a better option out there for you than Underdog Pick'em contests, especially this week, which is Feast Week on Underdog. They will be full of Thanksgiving Day promos, profit boosts, free player entries for your pick'em lineups where you're stringing together your player stats, anything from passing yards to rushing touchdowns to even fantasy points. Underdog pick'em contests are a ton of fun. It is the perfect way to get more invested in a game like Cowboys Giants, and you get a chance to win some big money. And on top of that, hell, support my channel in a big way in the process. People always ask me, what's the best way to support the channel? Honestly, signing up at Underdog, if you want to get into that, it's as good as it gets, just to share a little insider information there. So that is promo code TFG at Underdog, and good luck. Happy Thanksgiving. Let's keep going with the power rankings. At number 28, the Cleveland Browns picking up a win. Thursday night football in the snow. What an elite aesthetic with that snow game. Do not get rid of open air stadiums, please, NFL teams. Gotta love a game like that. And hey, this was what the Browns needed in that locker room. Just a little bit of life to help them get through this season. If you're a Browns fan, you may or may not be happy about it. I mean, this team needs a quarterback, so the lower that pick goes, or the higher, whichever way you want to look at it, the better. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I want to take away from this game on a short week division game in conditions like that, but a ton of fun to see Jameis out there enjoying himself. And I will say a more tangible thing for this team is Jerry Jeudy looks really good. That was a move that kind of had to work out for Cleveland. They obviously got rid of Amari Cooper. They went and traded for Jeudy, gave him a good amount of money. A lot of people, myself included, kind of question if that was too much based on what Jeudy has been to this point in his career, but he's really fit in nicely. So, some signs of positivity. Cleveland's looking for those, obviously. But a +1 for the Browns, and they get themselves out of the true bottom tier. And having Myles Garrett helps them do that a little bit too. That dude is just on a different plane of existence. But then at number 27, the Tennessee Titans felt like a regression to the mean week for both the Titans and the Texans, who we'll talk about later. The Texans probably not quite as good as their record had indicated. The Titans probably a little better than their record had indicated. They've been in all of these close games. They finally find a way to win in a wild, random-ass game. I mean, there was like 5 weird turnovers in this game on both sides. A ton of special teams impact in this game. But just watching the film on Tennessee, you're starting to see some good stuff from Will Levis. The big throws have made their return, which when the season started, that was a concern, was, well, Will Levis is turning the ball over a bunch and not giving you exciting plays. You're at least getting the exciting plays, the elite, truly elite arm talent, and some of these deep balls are just gorgeous, and he's hitting on them too. The pocket presence is still a major concern, as it was coming out of Kentucky, and unfortunately, in this game, Tennessee was relatively in control, and Will Levis throws as ugly of a pick six as you can draw up. So it still is not perfect for Will Levis. But hey, good for Tennessee to get a W in the win column, a locker room that I think needed it. But then the New Orleans Saints at number 26, they're going to drop down a spot because another team in their division we're going to talk about in just a second really impressed this week. Not a ton to add on the Saints this week. As they're coming off the bye week. It's hard enough to find things to say about the Saints when they do play football. Then I have the New England Patriots. Got to drop them down a couple spots. Just not a competitive effort against the Dolphins. Their kind of little mini hot streak that they witnessed midseason there seems to have come back to earth, and they're looking, unfortunately, closer to that team that really lacks talent and just has a long way to go. Not a ton to add on New England. A bummer to see the offense kind of go stagnant this week for sure. But then the Carolina Panthers at number 24, taking on the Kansas City Chiefs, giving them the absolute run for their money that the Chiefs did not expect as double-digit favorites in that game. Is this not the best case scenario for the Carolina Panthers? I mean, you knew going into the year that this defense was going to be an absolute flaming pile of dog shit. And it is an absolute flaming pile of dog shit. They have a lot of work to do to fill in the roster talent of that defense. And their best player is out too, by the way. Derek Brown is an absolute monster. Hasn't been out there for this team. But man, Bryce Young, not just in he looks like he can play NFL football kind of way, which the first couple of games coming off the benching, it was kind of a pump the brakes, we'll see where this goes. This was a legitimately great performance from Bryce Young, really out there with not a ton of guys to throw to. I mean, you've got Xavier Legette, looks nice, but Legette let him down in a big spot in this game. Bryce still battled through it. Jatavion Sanders making a ton of plays. He has a scary injury. He leaves the game halfway through it. Bryce just kept making throws. The biggest thing for me on Bryce is how he beat Steve Spagnuolo's blitzes in this game, because if you have dove into Bryce Young film to this point in his NFL career, and even going back to Alabama as well, he has been horrible against the blitz. This was the best by far. I mean, he dominated the blitz, throwing deep outs, deep crossers with anticipation, extending plays with his feet, throwing deep balls with accuracy. It's everything you hoped this would look like in year 2 with Bryce Young going against one of the best defenses in the league. And the back-to-back defending Super Bowl champs. I mean, leading a 8-point touchdown, game-tying drive with 2 minutes left. The Panthers are in a good spot, based on their expectations this year. If we're saying the Panthers scored too soon, I think Panthers fans will take that problem based on how things have gone in recent years. So a big thumbs up for Carolina. They are not an easy out because this offense is just working this year. For the majority of the year, they've been a very solid offense. But then the New York Jets rounding out this tough outs tier that are still bad teams, and that is who the New York Jets are, is a bad football team, even if they have talent. We didn't have to watch them play football this week, thank God. But at least they get a +1 in the power rankings because the Patriots looked really bad and are dropping down a couple spots. But let's go to our next tier, my favorite tier. Every time we do it, that is Schrodinger's box of cats, these teams that are mystery box types of teams that are kind of half dead, half alive, and we're just going to have to see where the rest of the season goes. The Chicago Bears are going to start at the bottom of this tier. They're kind of in their own unique spot where they're better than all of those teams we just talked about. I mean, the last 2 weeks, Caleb has looked really good. That's an amazing sign for the Bears. And they've been in super competitive games against the Packers and Vikings, where really special teams cost the Bears both of those games, frankly. Just brutal special teams mistakes in this game. A fumbled punt, which is the worst play in football, and another blocked field goal. Also hilarious. Did you guys see that in overtime when the Vikings lined up for the game-winning field goal, they were in field goal safe man? Like, that's where Bears fans are at right now. Like, seriously, we just had 2 kicks blocked against us that have arguably cost us football games in the last week, and we can't even come out and try to block a kick? What the hell are we doing? Like, it's just hilarious. But that's the type of stuff that maybe will get Eberflus ran out of town. So maybe a best case scenario for the Bears where Caleb looks good, but you lose. So the Bears find themselves in Schrodinger's box of cats because they're still a very, I think a good, kind of overall football team. Like, they are not an easy team to play right now with a good defense and the offense figuring some things out. But the rest of the teams in this tier at least have some form of hopium in the sense of, if other people really have a downfall, they have a shot at least at the playoffs. And that does start with the Indianapolis Colts. They are 5-7. They would really need a collapse from either Denver or the Chargers, or Pittsburgh or Baltimore, somebody. Unlikely, but at least enough to say, hey, we got something to play for down the rest of the way. Look, that's a long shot either way you slice it. This is more about evaluating Anthony Richardson and seeing development from Anthony Richardson. And despite the box score that a lot of people are going to look at and freak out about, this was a good game from Anthony Richardson in a game where they only scored 6 points. I mean, they had a drop touchdown earlier. Richardson threw 4 or 5 really high leverage, high NFL read types of throws, accurate throws down the field. Ashton Doolin fails to get his second foot down on a dime of a 40-plus yard go ball from Richardson. He had one of the plays of the week where he keeps a 4th down alive and finds, I think it was Pittman over the middle of the field to convert a 4th down called back for holding. The team really let him down a lot in this game, and I'm not going to act like he was perfect. You're not expecting Anthony Richardson to look perfect, but it was a lot better than the box score showed, and just the kind of stuff we were saying earlier in the season where he just didn't seem to have a good feel for where he needed to go with the football in terms of processing and decision making. Seems much more comfortable with that type of stuff the last couple of weeks. So, You at least are encouraged by that, and it's good to see Latu coming on the last couple of weeks. It's certainly not all bad for the Colts, even if they got ultimately blown out by the best team in football in Detroit. Spoiler alert. Then the Tampa Bay Bucks at number 20. They're not going to move this week, destroying our 32nd ranked team this week, the New York Giants. But that's not to say I wasn't impressed by the Bucks. It's just it wasn't in the cards for them to move in the power rankings quite yet this week. But they needed to come out strong. They needed to take care of business. I was kicking myself for not making the Bucks one of my bets this week on Patreon, even though I did go 4-0 picking games on Sunday. So if you want access to my weekly picks, that is exclusive over on my Patreon. But the NFC South is really getting interesting, man. I think this Bucs team is better than their 5-6 record would indicate. They've really got this run game going. Bucky Irving, how freaking good and fun is he as a player? Mike Evans is back into the lineup. So it's a big deal. And number 19 is the Atlanta Falcons. They are a game ahead of the Bucs in that NFC South, by far the worst division in football. The Falcons, a big week here as well, coming off the bye week. How can they respond after that truly embarrassing performance against the Bucs? So even if both these teams are staying in the same spot in the power rankings, that's more of an indication of how teams are moving around them. If you really just look at these two teams, the Bucs are trending up, the Falcons are trending down, and this could get really interesting here. And for Atlanta, they got to find some answers offensively. If teams take away Drake London and your run game, can you draw some stuff up to get Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts to be bigger factors in this offense when you really need them? It's been there at times, but really concerning their inability to do that against Denver. And by the way, this defense, can you get something else from that unit than what you've gotten so far? They obviously lack talent, but you did hire a defensive coach. You would hope late into this playoff push that Raheem Morris can show some of the stuff that maybe a Jonathan Gannon has shown in Arizona to elevate a measly defensive roster. But then the LA Rams at number 18, dropping down 2 spots. Not the best outing, I almost said, in Philadelphia, because as it tends to happen in those LA games, it was essentially a home game for the Eagles. But not the best effort hosting the Eagles on Sunday Night Football. I just really don't trust the trench play for the Rams. And I know the D-line has gotten after it as a pass rush, and I like what they do in that phase, but I do not like how this team is able to kind of show up and defend the run against teams that do that well. A team like the Eagles, where Saquon Barkley damn near broke the rushing record. And they just can't keep Stafford protected on the offensive side of the ball. So they really feel like they are pressing every single week, trying to squeeze out whatever they can get on any given play. When you are so inconsistent in the trenches week after week, you really feel how much that impacts the inconsistency of the rest of the team. So they are a good team. They have McVay and Stafford and Kupp and Puka and all that, but it's not going in the right direction right now as they fall to 5-6 and are going to have to kind of prey on other teams' downfalls, like I said, to hopefully get into the playoffs here. The Cincinnati Bengals are going to stay put at number 17. They were on bye this week. They effectively have to win out at this point. We'll see if they can do it. It sounds unreasonable, but if you're looking for some hopium, Bengals fans, your remaining schedule, you got the Steelers twice. Those are going to be the big ones, obviously, and this Sunday they play the Steelers. But I wouldn't say those are unwinnable games for the Bengals. No game is unwinnable with how good this Bengals offense is. But beyond those 2 Steelers games, you got Cowboys, Titans, Browns. Pretty reasonable to think they can win those. And you got Denver at home in Cincinnati. So it's not impossible, but they gotta come out of the bye week ready to frickin' go. I think they can win any given Sunday, but can they find ways to seal these close games, get a little bit better with their run game, and figure out something with this defense? With everything we've said about Lou Anarumo over the last couple of years, theoretically, that should be possible for them to make some adjustments off the bye and get some stuff going defensively. So excited to see how they finish, but can't quite have them in the top half of the league, obviously, with what they've done this year. Then the Miami Dolphins at number 16. They've taken care of business. They've won 3 straight with Tua coming back. That's what you've hoped to see. They haven't really played anybody quite yet, especially the last 2 weeks. Raiders, Dolphins. They did beat the Rams 3 weeks ago. That was good to see. So that changes this week. Having to go to Lambeau, essentially with the season on the line, should be a hell of a Thursday night Thanksgiving game. I feel like I keep flooding you guys with promos, but I do want to just say I will be live for that game here on YouTube. So really excited to break that game down live. But yeah, Tua's doing a good job these last couple of weeks against some bad football teams. Achane, Waddle making plays this week, and this defense has been very underrated this season. That's probably been the biggest surprise of the Dolphins. So they're going up 2 spots, and if they can beat Green Bay, we can really start to have some serious conversations about Miami. And then at number 15, the 49ers, they fall down to 5-6. Really talked about how disastrous this season has been for them in last week's podcast. But those were not the 49ers that took the field in Lambeau. Not just no Brock Purdy, but no Nick Bosa, no Trent Williams. I mean, that game was going to be an uphill battle from the beginning. So kind of a week where I'm just going to kind of brush aside. We already dropped them a bunch last week. They fell 10 spots last week. But I also know what this Niners team is capable of any given Sunday. So going to be a big week here to kind of get a good evaluation on where they stand and how freaking healthy can they be through the last 6 weeks of this season. That's been their biggest issue. If this team can't get healthy, I could see them climbing up and still potentially winning the NFC West, depending on how things shake down. But obviously, that's not the position they're in at this point in time. But that is going to round out Schrodinger's box of cats. Let's move up to Tier 2. These are the true playoff caliber teams, although with the bottom couple teams here in this tier, I'm starting to question if they truly belong here. Not the best week for our 14th team here, Arizona. Our 13th team will be Washington. Just to finish out that thought. But let's start with Arizona. They dropped down 3 spots. A really disappointing performance this week by the offense. I think if you told me Sunday morning, okay, the Cardinals defense that has played really well the last few weeks, but obviously still lacks a lot of talent on that side of the ball. If you told me they were going to hold the Seahawks to 16 points, I would say, great, big win to separate your lead in the NFC West. Well, the offense just couldn't figure anything out. And Kyler certainly wasn't great. He made the one big mistake that was a huge difference in this game where he overthrows a 4th down, 4th and short conversion attempt. He overthrows Michael Wilson. It gets pick 6 the other way. I wouldn't say this was all Kyler Murray's fault. I mean, they could not protect their offensive line. Couldn't run block either. They could go nowhere on the ground. So this was the first game this season where the offensive line truly felt like a big issue. And they also weren't able to find those schematic answers that they've been able to find throughout the season either to assist Kyler Murray. So it was a really high difficulty outing for this offense, and that just hasn't been the case for them. This has been the offense that could find answers to the test and be adaptable with both a run game and a passing game. So, they've had their inconsistent moments this season. They've had their games where they've kind of looked like this, and it's definitely discouraging to see them late into the season when you hoped they had kind of grown as a team and shaken out of this. It's definitely discouraging to see that from the offense, but at the same time, the fact that this defense keeps playing like this is something encouraging to take out of this game for the Cardinals that they can hopefully get themselves through this season. So again, it's not all bad, but I do really want to see this team finish strong because they're still in a position to vie for a playoff spot, but this was not a great week for that. Now, the number 13 team here, Washington, going down 4 spots. We've kind of danced around the issue, I feel like, the last couple of weeks because things started so good for this Commanders team. But this team is a Hail Mary conversion away from losing 4 straight. Like, things have really fallen off. Up until this week, you could still look between the lines and say, well, Jaden Daniels is still really exceeding expectations, and you kind of thought they would still figure things out and be a really competitive playoff caliber team. I'm starting to have my doubts. I mean, the offense has just fallen off a cliff. Kliff with a K. Kliff Kingsbury has done this before, where they have great starts and then teams kind of make adjustments based on the film, what they're doing, and then Kliff runs out of answers. And I think that's what we're seeing. A lot of the creative schematic stuff that was helping Jaden play well on top of himself playing well has run out. The run game hasn't been as good. And this team is in trouble. They lose a game that they really should not have lost. I mean, they were 10-point favorites against Dallas. So a very discouraging week. And if they can't respond well, they are going to be dropping down a tier just based on how they've been playing lately. And not just that, they are going to find themselves out of, playoff positioning, frankly, depending on how things shake down if they can't win. I mean, they're 7-5 right now. That's great. But again, they just lost a game that they were not supposed to lose. So it's just not looking good for Washington. It's still been a successful season, but man, it would be a disappointment based on how things started if this team didn't even get into the playoffs. So I do pull for them to kind of straighten things out, and hopefully they have the right leadership with a guy like Dan Quinn to get that done. And you want to see Kliff come up with some answers as well because of all the hype he's gotten this year as well. Big week for both those teams. I think even some people might say those teams are too high in the power rankings based on some of the disappointments they had this week. But it's not just about week 12, right? We're still looking at the whole picture here, and they have an opportunity to bounce back. Let's get to number 12, the Los Angeles Chargers, who ran out of energy against the Ravens. A great start. They get up 10-0. Things are looking good. Herbert's balling. Ladd McConkey all over the field. The defense continuing to surprise us. And then, nope, ran out of gas. I mean, that's really all it was. You felt like the talent gap in terms of being able to stop someone like Derrick Henry, the just size, speed, strength, talent level of this defense needs a little bit more, I think. And offensively, the playmakers just not stepping up. Quentin Johnston getting in a time machine going back to his rookie season. That's tough to see because him playing well has been a big part of this team's success. So got to see Quentin especially have a short memory and get back on the right track. Otherwise, he will absolutely be getting replaced this offseason. I don't think it's panic mode for the Chargers. It was going to have to be a pretty big effort to win that game against Baltimore, in my opinion. But, they've still had a really good season, and, don't get too discouraged. They're still, I would say, ahead of their trajectory with this Harbaugh hire, but they just got to get back to work, and I'm sure they will. So they're actually not moving in the power rankings this week with really Arizona and Washington having bigger disappointments than the Chargers. But honestly, at least in terms of perspective and just eyeing this down, these are tied for my highest risers this week in the Seattle Seahawks, getting a +3, jumping up a tier into the playoff caliber tier. But in terms of how I perceive this team, regardless of how teams are moving up and down around them, this is the biggest jump in a team for me in my brain with the Seattle Seahawks. This is a dream to see Mike Macdonald's defense off the bye week, these last 2 weeks, really shaping into form. And we've seen this time and time again with these premium defensive coordinator hires where it can take some time. It's not always Brian Flores steps in and overnight you go from worst defense in the league to top 5. Not everybody can be Brian Flores. And that was a sidebar and not meant to be a diss at Mike Macdonald at all. I think the world of Mike Macdonald, but back on track. Coming off the bye week, this defense has completely turned into your best case vision for what this could look like this year with all these different body types on the edge where, One snap, he's got Leonard Williams coming off the edge. The next snap, he's rushing both linebackers up the middle. This multiple adaptable front that he ran in Baltimore coming to Seattle with really a fun pass rush, lighting up the Arizona Cardinals and setting the tone in the run game as well. The adjustments they've made at linebacker, they've shuffled the deck. How about our guy, Tyrese Knight?
But yeah, Bortolini is a great project behind Ryan Kelly.
Oh, Tyrese Knight. We got to break out the bell. I didn't think anybody liked Tyrese Knight. Yes, let's go. I'm stoked. This was a total my guy, and I got to him late, and I was like, I haven't heard literally anybody talk about him. That's what gets me excited for draft season approaching, is guys like Tyrese Knight, where nobody was talking about him, and I had a 4th-round grade on him. Seattle takes him. I'm gassing up that pick. Everyone's like, who the hell is Tyrese Knight? He's out there starting his rookie season as a linebacker out of UTEP and looking pretty damn good. So, like, they've shaped up in the second level, and then the secondary also. That's the other thing with Mike Macdonald, is not these crazy adaptable moving fronts and the blitzing, but how he's been able to coach up the communication in the secondary with all of these kind of rotating 2-shell coverages that just demand a high level of IQ and preparation from and communication from his players on the back end to pass off zones, to trigger when you need to not play passively in off-zone coverage, which I would say Seattle has been that for 3 straight years, is just a passive, squishy zone forward defense. It's a different mentality shift with Mike Macdonald, and that has shown coming off the bye week. A win over the Niners last week, and then doing what they did to a Cardinals passing game that's had a ton of success this year. I'm just blown away. And if this continues, we are talking about this genuinely being one of the best defenses in the league, which is exciting because I think that was always in the realm of possibilities, not necessarily likely, but knowing how we felt about Mike Macdonald and what he did in Baltimore coming into the year for Seattle, for a defense that had a lot of talent, to see it reaching its potential it's just like, words cannot describe what that means for this Seahawks team, not just this season, but their future, and how excited you should be getting if you're a Seahawks fan. I know I'm kind of pumping you up for disappointment down the stretch here, because offensively they still have some stuff to figure out. I mean, they were not great offensively in this game. It just came down to their guys making a few plays that the Cardinals weren't able to make. But Geno still has a really ugly interception in this game. You still feel like at any given moment, Geno could cost you the game or go on a clutch game-winning drive. He is a full spectrum in terms of the offensive experience. But this has just not been the Seahawks defense we've gotten used to since the Legion of Boom fell apart. And now it's looking like it's back. Legion of Boom 2.0. It's a completely different style, but man, there's just a lot of excitement here, and I don't want to compare them to Legion of Boom quite yet, because that's a special unit, but hard not to think about it when you see them out there in Seattle in those jerseys winning a big game. But let's move on to the number 10 team, the Denver Broncos. They actually move up +3 just because, Arizona, Washington, Chargers, none of them really had the best week. They beat the Raiders. Okay, they continue to be that team that takes care of business against bad teams. But Bo Nix, hey, he might be stealing that Offensive Rookie of the Year award from Jaden Daniels. He keeps putting up box scores like that and playing like this. He's really been impressive, and I'm proud to say that I defended that pick for Denver. I like Bo Nix more than a lot of people out there. There was also other people in the draft community that did too. I was not alone with that, but he definitely had his haters out there. I just wish I was a little bit higher on Denver as a team coming into the year, because, hey, Sean Payton's been really solid. This defense has been great. Riley Moss, what's the injury update on him, Broncos fans? Because that's a big one. He's been really good this year as their CB2 opposite of Surtain. He had a knee injury in this game. So we'll keep an eye on that. But, yeah, another good week for Denver. They haven't fallen off in the way that I think was kind of expected for this team, because they won a bunch of games against bad opponents. Looked at, down the stretch, figured, they might drop a couple that they should win and open up the wild card spot in the AFC. They haven't done that. Like, this team is well on their way towards getting a playoff spot at this point. Schedule does get interesting, though. They've got Cleveland this week. Got to do what they've been doing, take care of business again. Then the bye week to get ready for a huge stretch. Down the final path here. You got Colts, Chargers, both vying for wild card positioning one way or another, and then Bengals, same deal there. And then you finish with the Chiefs. So it's not an easy close to their schedule, but I think they've shown that they can win a couple more games and get in. But then we got the Texans at number 9. Another situation here where, well, they didn't have as bad of a week as Washington, so they're actually going to go up a spot. But they lose this week, and I continue to be kind of underwhelmed by the Texans. And even though it's funny how the power rankings work sometimes, you'll see the +1 and be like, that's really weird. I agree with you. Just the way things shook down with how teams played in this tier this week. But I feel worse about the Texans this week than I did last week. This defense continues to be like the worst good defense I've ever seen in my life. Like, I understand they're a good defense and they've won a lot of games with their defense this year, but they give up way too many big plays, just massive coverage busts all season long. They're not getting that cleaned up, and offensively they continue to be unable to block. And people are saying CJ Stroud's having a down year. I've been wildly impressed by CJ Stroud and his ability to carry a Texans team that frankly is not as good of a football team as they were last season. Which was not what we expected. We thought the team around Stroud was going to get better. Well, they can't protect. And again, defensively, they just haven't been as disciplined as they were last year, even if they have a better edge rush duo to get after the quarterback. So they got a lot to clean up, and they're running out of time to do it. I think this is a good football team. They should still win the AFC South, but they can't afford to keep dropping games like that, obviously. Ultimately, it was a weird game with a bunch of big random special teams plays. They still were lining up to kick a field goal to win the game, or at least tie the game late. That was like a 27-yard kick that Kyamie Fairbairn missed. So you're not expecting that to happen every single week. But yeah, Houston's in a weird spot. Then we got the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 8. The two teams ahead of them here had good weeks, so Pittsburgh's going to move down 2 spots to number 8. Ultimately, I don't feel too different about Pittsburgh. I'm not going to panic after that loss in Cleveland. It was a weird snow game that they couldn't convert on 4th and 1. They had some miscommunications with the snow. So, it's a weird game. I'm not going to panic about it. They've got a long week now to bounce back and get back to being that really dominant version of this team that we had seen for multiple weeks. I will say their inability to get those short yardage situations and just their offensive line in general, I don't trust it right now. So that's one area of this team that I have my hesitations that could hold this offense back, as we saw in that snow game. But I still really like this Steelers team. Green Bay, however, is going to pass up Pittsburgh, just doing exactly what you hoped to see from them, just beating the absolute snot out of a Niners team that has been their bugaboo. Obviously, as I said, that was a different Niners team, but still to come out and beat them in the way that they did, where they come out, and this is what you've wanted to see from Green Bay, play complete team football on all 3 sides of the ball in a way that they just haven't necessarily done every week, in a huge spot here to potentially knock your boogeyman out of the playoffs. It was a big win for Green Bay to win this game. What was the final score? Like 38-7 or something like that. I don't even remember what the final score was. Could have been even more if Christian Watson doesn't let a perfect deep ball pass from Jordan Love bounce off his face mask. Jordan Love is still being a little bit reckless with the football, but they're so good in every other aspect right now that it doesn't really matter, and that aggressiveness leads to big plays too. So he hasn't ascended as a quarterback into one of those elite guys, but it's not something that I think you're panicking about for Green Bay right now either. Huge game Thursday night against the Dolphins to kind of continue to hopefully build this team up, because they're a good team. No one's going to sit here and deny that. But can they kind of prove to us that they can actually be a Super Bowl contender and get into the mix with teams like Philadelphia and Detroit in the NFC. I think they still have that potential. We'll see where it goes. And then Minnesota, they just keep winning, man. And it's not always pretty. They slopped this thing up against the Bears, but also kind of got fortunate with Chicago and their special teams blunders. I do think this team has their holes, right? They are spotty in the secondary for sure. And offensively, they just kind of have their moments, whether it's previous weeks where Sam Darnold's a little reckless with the ball or, this week where the offensive line, I think, let them down in some spots. But, you're nitpicking with the Vikings to find weaknesses as to why they aren't in the top tier at this point. I still don't consider them as complete and trustworthy of a team as these 5 teams we're going to talk about in the Super Bowl team. But for them to be the best team outside of that top tier is a reminder of just how good they've been as a team on both sides of the ball this year, and how many expectations they've exceeded this year with what I consider to still be probably the second best overall coaching staff in the league. Maybe third. Detroit, is pretty special too. But Kansas City, Detroit, Minnesota might be next in line there if you're debating best coaching staffs in the league. But yes, obviously 2 of those coaching staffs find themselves in the Super Bowl contender tier here. Top 5 looks very similar this week. There's a little bit of movement here. Kansas City staying put at number 5. This is what they do, right? No matter who they're playing, they're going to be in like a 1-score game in the end, and it's going to come down to Mahomes making plays. It's exactly what he did. Literally the least surprising game-winning drive in NFL history against that Panthers defense. I think everybody knew. I certainly tweeted it out when the Panthers tied it up. Like, yeah, I mean, good for the Panthers. You love what you see there, but this game's over. Like, Mahomes is going to do some bullshit, and they're going to win this game, and that's exactly what happened. So it's kind of sad for Chiefs fans that we almost dismiss that stuff at this point, but that is like, if you look at this team and look at their point differential and their 10-1 record and say, like, this is not as good of a 10-win team as you would expect, that's why. Like, because they just they're so consistently able to make magic happen at the end of games. And they're still a Super Bowl contender, even if it's not always pretty. But I don't think their kind of dominance and upside is quite as good as these top 4 teams. Baltimore at number 4. Very impressed by the way that they just kind of settled in, took a chill pill and dominated the Chargers as this game went on. The defense, especially, to really bunker down after it was a rough start, looking like another bad outing for the Ravens defense. But, to make some adjustments, not let Herbert throw the ball all over him and to shut down the run in the way that they did. Great to see that, because as long as this defense can just be solid, this team's going to be a real problem. Offensively, didn't feel like their passing game was clicking on all cylinders. Lamar actually sprayed a lot of throws in this game. Not to diss on Lamar. I still think he's the MVP of the league at this point in time. But anyway, like, he wasn't hitting all his throws, so they're like, all right, well, screw it. Let's just run Derrick Henry down their throat. And that's what's really made this Ravens team so dangerous all season to me, is kind of back to what we were talking about week 4, week 5, where they have the ability to be a multi-dimensional team. They have shown in games they can throw all over the yard, beat a team like the Bengals with Lamar being the MVP, and then being able to pivot with Derrick Henry in that run game. So just an impressive outing. Unfortunately, they're going to drop down a spot because the Philadelphia Eagles have taken this spot from the Ravens. It's not a discredit to the Ravens. It's a credit to Philadelphia that at this point in time, I would say is the most talented team in the NFL in an absurdly complete roster from top down. I think we're really feeling the effects of Howie Roseman and Vic Fangio with Howie Roseman securing the secondary as one of the best in the league with these 2 rookies. It's just really turning this into a special defense, not to mention the improvements they've made at linebacker as well, finding a guy like Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean. We knew this D-line could get after it, and they've been doing that the last few weeks. It sucks to see Brandon Graham get hurt. I do still think they have the depth to overcome that, but it is an injury that's not going to be fun to deal with for Philadelphia. But I don't know how much it's going to matter when the rest of this team is so good. I mean, they were out there with Devonta Smith offensively, and it just didn't matter. I mean, A.J. Brown is an absolutely elite wide receiver. I still can't believe how many people were upset when I did my wide receiver tier maker list. that I had A.J. Brown above Jamar Chase. Like, I understand you can make a very good argument that Jamar Chase is better, but that's disrespectful to A.J. Brown to not consider him one of the 3 or 4 best receivers in the league. He is just absolutely dominant and a true alpha. The run game, obviously. I mean, Saquon Barkley, what a signing. Running backs matter, people. And Jalen Hurts doing everything he needs to run the show. If this team is the symphony orchestra constructed of the most talented musicians in the world, Jalen Hurts is conducting them along, not making mistakes, and allowing this team to really, really dominate the league right now. And it is going to be very, very interesting. Like, I think this is very much shaping up for an Eagles-Lions matchup at some point. The amount of just trench play and talent going at each other in that game, I'm excited, and I hope we get to see that at some point here. But moving on to number 2, the Buffalo Bills on bye this week. Not anything new to add on the Bills, but I'm obviously very impressed by what they've accomplished this year. I think you could make a case Philadelphia, just with how dominant they've been, should pass the Bills, but don't necessarily want to punish the Bills on a bye week this week, so I didn't quite feel like going there, but it does feel like it's trending that way just because the Eagles look that good. But Detroit at number 1, back-to-back weeks not allowing a touchdown. That, to me, I mean, the offense this week against the Colts, like they honestly just, I mean, they're not that they weren't good. I mean, this offense is absurd, but this was more of a screen game, run game type of offense. Jared Goff didn't really have to do much this week. But to me, what just continues to be so impressive about Detroit is how good they've been defensively. When Hutchinson went down, it was like, well, they're going to have to kind of, I mean, I was still very, I think that was the week I moved them to number 1, was that week. But I did say, like, they're going to have to prove that they can just be an average defense to complement this offense and what they're capable of. Well, they've been like a great defense. Aleem McNeil has really stepped up with Hutchinson down. They've obviously found Zadarius Smith on the trade block, and just their overall, culture and ass-kicking mentality permeates throughout that defense. So that's been really, frankly, and yet another surprise for this Lions team is just how good they've been defensively, even with Hutchinson down. So this is the best team in football. They are just blowing out like pretty good football teams, and just are an unstoppable freight train right now. Well deserving of everybody's number 1 spot in the power rankings. I don't know if there's power rankings out there that's going to have a different team at number 1 right now. So there are your Week 13 power rankings. I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, I will see all of you that want to follow over on the Fully Inflated Football podcast for the game-by-game recap if you want a little bit more on what we saw last week. I'm going to have a kind of opening segment on the state of running back play in the league that I'm excited to get into. So yeah, we'll see you guys over there for the podcast. Make sure you subscribe as well on the channel if you enjoy. I've also got a little bit of draft content brewing as we approach that part of the NFL cycle. Very much looking forward to that. So yeah, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Please do hit that like button on the way out. That's all we got. We'll see you later.